Most parents think self-defense means how to punch and kick, how to get away from harm, and yes, that's important, but there's a step that comes before all that, because if your child doesn't know what they're defending, their space, their body, their right to say no, all those physical skills don't matter. Today I want to show you what the foundation is before all the self-defense. The things from coaching for over a decade of martial arts to kids that actually make the biggest difference. Because the kids that always stand up for themselves aren't necessarily the strongest ones, but they're the ones that know that they have the right to say no. And when I look at the kids who struggle, who get targeted, who have that self-doubt, the problem is rarely physical. Most of the time is that nobody ever taught them that their voice matters, that they have the right to say no, and that respecting others doesn't come at the cost of ignoring yourself. So point one is the balance that we got wrong. Parents are pretty good at teaching respect. We teach our kids to be kind, to share, to show empathy towards others, to care about other people's feelings and to be polite, and whilst that is very important, we teach them to respect others, but somewhere along the lines we forget to teach them to respect themselves. And think about the messages we give the kids when they're growing up. It's don't be rude, go say hi, make sure you give them a hug, don't ignore them. And I'm not saying that manners are bad, they're important. But if we're not careful, kids start to learn that it's more important to please others than to listen to themselves. If we reinforce to always keep other people happy and to always be polite, sometimes that teaches the kid that it's better for them to stay quiet, not to read their emotions and what they're feeling. What we want is a balance between that. We actually want to make sure that we validate our kids' emotion. We want to teach them that they deserve the same respect that we're trying to teach them to give others. To trust their gut if something doesn't feel right. And then confidence isn't always about being loud and standing tall. It's trusting yourself, knowing that if you have a gut feeling, that we teach them to trust that, and that it's more important for us to validate their emotion and to trust how they feel than to keep somebody else happy. And that's truly where self-defense starts. Self-defense starts when you understand what you're defending, what you believe in, and trusting your own gut, knowing when someone's coming too close into your space, when someone's breaking those boundaries. So we want to make sure that we're validating our kids' feelings and make sure that we're giving them the tools to be able to set their boundaries, to believe their gut feeling, and to have that self-belief and not doubt themselves at all. And that brings us to point two, which is the 3 circles. What are the 3 circles? The 3 circles is an activity that we can do with our kids. I would actually recommend, if they're younger than like 9 years old, I would actually draw it out. If they're a bit older, it's a discussion that you can have a little bit more naturally with your kids. But adults teach kids the idea of stranger danger, and that we shouldn't trust other people, but it's also knowing that the people that we do know, what are the boundaries that we have within there. So the 3 circles, we have our inner circle. In our inner circle, that is like our immediate and possibly extended family. Within our inner circle, we do have physical boundaries that are probably a little bit more broad, a little bit more open up. But it's important that we do validate that they have the right at any stage to be able to say no to any of those physical touches. So mum, dad, brother, sister, possibly grandparents, we get the hugs. With certain conditions, there's kisses. But it's important to also validate to them that they can say no at any time. I was actually talking to my partner a few weeks ago and I was wondering, I have a 7-month-old baby, at what point do I stop kissing my baby? And what I realized is that it's when he doesn't want to. If he gets frustrated, I'm not going to keep pushing that boundary. I'm going to stop kissing him. When he gets older, to be able to verbalize it, as soon as he says, no, I don't want to, even if it comes from embarrassment, it's a boundary that he's setting and it's something that I'm going to respect. So that takes us to the outer circle. The outer circle are more like friends, family, friends, and this is where we want to start to really define boundaries. That people on the outside, we get potentially handshakes, high fives, and this is to show respect because we also want to show that being polite is good, but at any point they can say no. Hugging is only for permission based. You don't hug to be polite in this middle circle. You hug when you allow someone in, or maybe when you're going to let them come in, possibly to your inner circle. And then your outer circle, this is people that we don't know, and they basically get nothing. They get nothing unless you want. And that's when we go to possibly handshaking and high-fiving. But the thing is, it's not that clear. When kids go into school, they're going to start playing sports, and sports introduces new physical boundary. If it's a contact sport, we're going to touch. If they're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's going to be a very close interactions, but we want to make sure that we still understand what we know is important to us, and if anyone pushes it to a point that we feel uncomfortable, we have the right to say no. It doesn't matter if we're in the inner circle. If we feel uncomfortable, we say no. If it's the middle circle, we can limit them and we can push them back out so they don't get anything. And if they're the outer circle, we absolutely don't owe anybody anything, especially when it comes to our physical touch. So that leads us to the question, who belongs in what circle? And this is such an interesting activity to just ask your kids. If they're young kids, draw out the circles and get them to fill out who belongs in where. It's also going to show you where they view them, how comfortable they are with them, and where they let them in. And it's okay for extended family to be in the mid-circle. They don't need to get the physical touch and the respect that you do as a parent, or as their brothers or sisters potentially get. The most important thing is to validate however your kid feels when they're sharing this to you, because you never want to tell them, no, this person deserves more. That's not your decision to make. That's your kids. And it's also not just about touch, it's about space. How close do I let someone get to me? It's about time. How much time do I give these people? And also trust. How much do I trust them? The people on the outside, they don't get any trust until they come to the middle. It saves the time. I give someone more time, more trust, more space. Point number 3 is that boundaries aren't just physical. They're also emotional, social and relational too. An example is, just because someone tells you something doesn't make it true. And this is a big part I see about confident kids that avoid being bullied. When we set boundaries of how we allow someone to talk to us, it protects us from being bullied or being suppressed. If we have a boundary, or if we teach a boundary to our kid to not allow someone to speak down to us, it gives us the power to not take that on board. And that's an emotional boundary. Now, just because someone pressures us into doing something, and this happens a lot as a kid with peer pressure, and that's more of like a social boundary. We can say no, we don't have to be forced into doing an activity that we didn't want to do. And also, just because someone pressures you into doing something, this could be physical, this could also be like that peer pressure, that could be relational as well. When we build relationships and trust with somebody, we don't owe them anything further just because we have a relationship with them. And it's teaching our kids that they can say no at any point. Now, most bullying doesn't start with a punch, it starts with words. When a bully says something cruel, your kid starts to wonder if it's true. But when your kid understands that someone doesn't have the right to speak down to you, that gives them the power to not take it on board and say, is this true? It says, you don't have the right to speak to me like that because I'm worth more than this. My self-quality is higher than allowing someone that's speaking down to me to continue without me saying no, that is enough. And that brings us to point number 4, where kids learn boundaries from watching us. And I think this is a discussion that parents really do need to hear, is that it's not one conversation that we're going to have with kids that are going to allow them to build a personal boundary or a physical boundaries. It's about modeling this behavior. It's about saying no in your life. We don't need to please other people. And I've learned this even more becoming a father. I've learned that my family is the most important thing in my life, and I don't need to please anyone else. So every time I say no to, if it's time, if it's working more, if it's giving my energy to things that doesn't matter to me, this is setting an example to my kids of saying that no, I'm setting a fair boundary because I know what's important in my life, and I'm modeling the behavior for them to understand what's important to them and allowing them to say no to people in their lives. The pressure is real. Doesn't matter if you're a kid or if you're an adult in a workplace, you're going to feel the pressure to say yes if it's to extra work, responsibility, people coming into your space, taking up your time. And the more we exercise the muscle to say no, we're modeling that behavior to our kids to build that boundary. Now, self-defense and protecting yourself is started by understanding your boundaries. In my work, it's very important that I protect my space. I don't allow people that I'm interacting with at work to come closer to an arm's length. And I'm in a high-risk work environment. So this is protecting me. When I set this physical boundary, not only is it a good behavior for my work, but it also allows me to have a higher reaction time to set a boundary. If I allow people to come closer, not only does the risk increase, what happens is once you let a boundary slip once, it happens again. We've got to be strong, we've got to be firm by saying no. So that's your superpower, is no. Knowing when that is enough, I'm not comfortable with this. And this is what we want to pass on to our kids. So if there's one thing you want to remember from this video, is that self-defense isn't just punching and kicking. It's about understanding your boundaries and the ability to speak up. That their voice matters, that their feelings matter. And not everybody gets access to you or your kids just because they asked for it or just because they said. Children that understand that are harder to manipulate and build more confidence and resilience. They're harder to bully. And this creates such a strong foundation to protect yourself and learn practical self-defense in the future. Now, before you go, I'd appreciate if you like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know how you go in the comments. And the challenge is to do the 3-circle discussion or conversation with your kid. And if you want to avoid that awkward conversation that's kind of impromptu, I have a challenge in my Creating Confident Kids school community, which is bringing a bunch of parents together who want to build confident kids through martial arts principles. And I have an activity that kind of leads into this conversation naturally in a couple of different age brackets. One that's nice and friendly and playful for the younger kids, and something that's a little bit more playful but more of like a challenge for the older kids, but allows a nice segue into this conversation without just being like, who is your inner circle, and having that awkward like, what are you talking about, mom? What are you talking about, dad? So if you're interested, check out the link in the description, and I'll see you in the community.